right, Dr. Rotunda, you just let me know when we're ready to start. Since we're on such a tight schedule, maybe
Yeah.
we should, because it's
Yeah, go
2
for it.
minutes in. All right, let's do it. Is there anything you wanted to do from NYSCA?
Nope, not right now.
Okay.
Okay.
So you'll get your welcome from NYSCA later. So good morning, everybody. Let me just go to the next slide. And so much for moving to the next slide. Let me just move this out of the way and try it from here. Here we go. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to School Counseling Regs 101, but we know that it's not really a 101 because these have been around for a little bit with a couple-year hiatus in between because of COVID. So on behalf of the New York State School Counselor Association, we have heard from many of you, both principals and counselors, that a little review and refresher would be helpful. So today, and I'm just moving our faces around here, we're going to go over the highlights of the amended regs that were passed in 2017, but went into effect in 2019 in New York State and 2020 in New York City. We're going to look at the relationship of what NYSED selected, the parts of the ASCA national model that NYSED included in the regulations. And interestingly enough, I got an email last night from ASCA that at the conference this summer, they are celebrating, we all should have remembered this, the 20th anniversary of the first edition of the ASCA national model. And so, of course, those of you who are school counselors know that the national model, it was the impetus for us to have a unified vision and voice for school counseling programs across the country. And then, of course, each state made their adjustments to make it more state specific. We're going to do a quick look at the ASCA mindsets and behaviors. Those are the revised standards. They came out in 2014. Those were the updates of the ones from 100 years ago, 1997, when the first ASCA national standards came out. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about collaboration with the hope that our building administrators and our school counselors have a better understanding of the work of each other and how to make these programs work best for the sake of our kids. So I happen to be a Peter Senge fan and know that we do have shared visions in our schools, but the shared vision is really about the goals and the dreams that we have for the success of our students. So together, building administrators, our principals with their leadership teams, our school counselors, and our teachers talk about what do we want to create together. So before we go any further, a couple of reminders. Please, as we go through the workshop, I'm going to ask you to drop your questions in chat. We will do a Q&A at the end, and that will be at approximately 10:15. We promised our building administrators a tight 45-minute overview workshop, and then we'll have that 15 minutes at the end for anybody that wants to stay around a little bit and see what questions people might have. Some questions we might not have immediate answers for, but Dr. Rotunda and I have gone back to State Ed to get some clarity around some of the things that have been a little more complicated, especially as we move further into the implementation process. So please, Bob, keep an eye on chat for me, just in case I miss something. And if there's anything critical or really important immediately, let's put that up and let's see if we can process it immediately. So I know some of you are going to think that this is kind of silly. But as I've worked around the state and in other districts across our country, there is still some confusion as to who are school counselors and what do they do. So back in the old days, we used to use the term guidance counselor. But believe it or not, in 1978, the last time New York State updated the regulations that talk about the scope of practice for a school counselor, in other words, what do they do? And it talked about certification and preparation. The term guidance counselor was removed and the word school counselor went into certification, preparation, and of course, our scope of practice. So basically in New York, we're certified, not licensed, unless some of your school counselors, some of you in this room, also hold a license as a mental health counselor, an LMHC. So in New York, we have many school counselors certified who continue their education and also can, sorry guys, I did have it off, I thought. I've done exactly what I've asked everybody else to do, mute your phone. But anyway, so certification is the bottom line credential to work in a public setting. And then again, some folks have continued their education, gone back, and now have the LMHC on top of their certification. New York State requires a total of 60 credits for what used to be permanent and is now professional certification. And the reason I mention this is because lots of times people don't realize the rigor of the coursework that is required for a certified school counselor. Many of our master's programs, with these changes in regulations in 2019, well, when they went into effect, went from a 48 credit master's plus the additional 12 credits to a 60 credit master's. And again, the term school counselor was introduced in the regulations that went into effect in 1978. So I know I was a guidance director on Long Island in the 90s and in the 2000s. And I know that term seems to still be in effect. And if we have a little time later, we can talk about why the term was changed from guidance counselor to school counselor. So what do school counselors do? School counselors are schizophrenic because we have a foot in two doors. We have a foot in the mental health door of providing mental health support for our students. We also have a foot in the education door because we also provide academic support, college and career readiness, and then the SEL, which fits over on the mental health side. So our goal in our profession is to help our students be successful in school. All of you in this room know a student cannot succeed academically if their mental health is not in balance. We know that we have struggled, especially through the pandemic, and continue to struggle with the amount of mental health support that our students continue to need. We help students manage emotions, support them in understanding appropriate behavior. We help them with their post-secondary planning. We start with kindergarten, even pre-K in some of our settings. And so school counselors provide support for students across the three tiers. There are lessons that we deliver. We provide short-term counseling, not therapy. Therapy cannot be provided in a school setting by anybody, by a counselor, a school psychologist, or a social worker, and that then becomes the referral out. We collaborate with families and teachers. We advocate for students. We are becoming DEI experts, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, really important in terms of the needs of our students today, and especially in a very diverse state like New York. And last but not least, we use data, and I cannot emphasize that enough, why the use of data is so very important to understand what students need and how we go about providing those services. So this is just a quick little timeline. Dr. Rotunda will be sending you a link to the webinar. It is being recorded in case you came in late, and also to the PowerPoint. So you'll have a copy of this to refer back to. So the original regs way back 1978, back in the dinosaur ages, where my job as a school counselor when I first started was to wait for the kids to show up. Building administrators, you know how different that is. Counselors are not in their offices, and that's because they're out there working with kids in classrooms, serving on your committees, running groups, providing mandated and non-mandated services, and as I mentioned, in our classrooms. So finally, through the advocacy of NYSCA, working with NYSID since the early 2000s when that first ASCA model came out, we've been trying to get an organized structure in place for school counseling. Finally, in 2014, NYSID began to make the initial efforts by bringing people together across the state. And lo and behold, we finally, in 2017, saw the newest regulations, again, implementing the scope of work of a school counselor, also made significant changes in our preparation programs, in our universities, and also in certification. The certification for school counselors changes again with the exam going into effect in March 2024, unless there's a little bit of a delay. So some key things here that the state is requiring. And I'll let you take a look at that for a minute. So every K through 12 student has access to a certified school counselor, and we all know the word access is subject to interpretation. But we know across the state, because this is an unfunded mandate, like so many others, that access may be coming a little bit slower than we would like, because adding a position to a budget requires adding a position to a budget. And that can be expensive. So many districts are trying to meet that regulation by increasing their school counseling staff with a new position each year. Every building is required to have a comprehensive school counseling program right out of the regs. And we're going to unpack what that means. The comprehensive school counseling program is aligned with the ASCA national model, but not the whole ASCA national model, because to dot every I and cross every T and complete 30 different forms, we'd spend an awful lot of time doing that. There really are just 4 or 5 key things that the state is asking us to do, the most important ones. School counseling programs are available for all, and huge change that every student in grades 6 through 12 has an individual progress review, individual, no longer in groups, which is the way I used to do them when I was a middle school and high school counselor pre-2019. So again, the 5 key things, and again, you'll have this without having to plow through the regs, though we do have the links to the regs embedded on this. Again, the comprehensive program access, the IPR, the curriculum. We are required to deliver a curriculum, but no specifics as to how many lessons per grade level. And then the delivery of more direct services. And counselors, you know better than anyone why those direct services are more important than indirect services, all those meetings we attend to help support our schools. All important, but the direct services, our time with kids, is the critical part. So NYSED really did a lot of homework. They didn't just throw these regs together. It took 3 years and a ton of meetings. They brought in folks from ASCA, from other state departments of education, from our own State Department of Education, counseling directors, superintendents of schools, principals, counselors from across the state. And of course, the NYSCA members, NYSCA board members were invited. They wanted our program to be aligned to the school mission, the district mission, and our school improvement plans, so that we're all working in harmony. Like the Senge quote, it's a shared vision. It's about partnerships with our admins for systemic change. It's also by collaborating with external agencies, especially now more than ever before, to help support and fill in the mental health services, the gaps that we have, since so many of our students are still struggling post-COVID. Listen, we all know some kids missed up to 2 years in and out with face-to-face school. And then the goal is to promote student academic, social, emotional, and college and career readiness, and to help them acquire knowledge and skills. So, Dr. Rotunda, help me out here. What difference are these regs making in your building? Or how has it impacted your collaboration with your school counselor? Let's see what folks want to share. Let's see if we have any sharing going on.
In the chats, or raise your hand.
I think the chats might be best, Bob, if we can do that.
There's close to 200 people on.
Okay.
Chats would be better.
All right. You think the chats will be better? Yes. Okay. And then we can come back to this later. But what are you saying? What difference has it made, or how have the regs impacted your collaboration? Do we have anybody joining in yet?
Yeah, I've seen a bigger push for SEL, bringing restorative justice, restorative circle training with encouragement, standardized practices across multiple buildings in our district. That's good.
Okay.
I came into leadership in the heat of COVID. I'm still learning.
We're all still learning, folks.
That's good.
Yes.
Counselors have less time to provide direct services because they were working in the one-to-one student review meetings.
Okay.
Our community is less the regs of our school and more staff understanding of the council role.
And so, Bob, we'll hold up there just for a second, and folks,
Okay.
continue to drop your comments in, because we'll be capturing the chat also as part of the packet that you'll be getting also. But we're hoping that we are seeing somewhat of a difference, that the regulations are moving it in a positive direction. We also know that there are some issues that people are having, beginning to figure out how to do this. You know, there's only so many hours of the day, the plate is only so large. So we will spend a little time talking about that. And did anybody drop in anything on chat about collaboration with their counselor?
Not specifically.
Okay, all right. So folks, keep that in mind. You know, some of you have fabulous relationships, and some of us still need to learn how to better communicate. So counselors, you know, even our ability, our need, it's an imperative that we share these changes with our building administrators. Building administrators, if your counselors haven't spoken to you yet, get them to talk to you. That is so important, to have those conversations, because change doesn't come easy. I'll just share a few things quickly here. The ASCA domains, counselors, you know this, have not changed. So we still have our academic, our college and career. The one that has changed is personal social is now social emotional. And that's come with also the standards that New York State has on the NYSED website, the standards for SEL programs. These are the mindsets and behaviors, folks. So we went from the 3 domains, academic, career, personal, social, and now we have learning strategies, self-management skills, and social skills. So there are 36 mindsets and behaviors. Personally, my bias is I focus in on this category 2, the behavior standards, because they are more measurable. But when we build our lessons, when we run our groups, we use these as part of our goals for students. So we also will send you the 2021 version. Sometimes, unless we're ASCA members or we go to the ASCA National Conference, these may not just appear in your mailbox. And principals, certainly you wouldn't have a copy unless you went looking for them. But these resources are on the ASCA website, and they are free. Now, this is also important. New York State, as we all know, has shifted to MTSS. We used to have response to intervention, RTI, with PBIS, positive behavior intervention supports. They've been partnered. So now we have MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. Tier 1 for counselors is our curriculum and the IPRs for grades 6 through 12. Tier 2, group counseling, specialized small group activities. For example, some of us have programs, My Brother's Keeper, and I know those are small group activities, but they're not necessarily group counseling. And then our circles, our restorative circles. And then our, excuse me, our intensive activities, individual counseling, both the mandated and the non-mandated. And for students who are non-mandated, who need ongoing, regular, weekly support in those 40, 45-minute sessions, are referrals to mental health counseling supports. So the MTSS model aligns with school counseling, building administrators, as it also aligns with what's going on with the way your teachers are delivering services. So let's take a look here. Sorry, I have our faces covering up part of it. There we go. So access to a school counselor, I spoke about this just a little bit previously. Access is a little tricky if there is not a full-time certified school counselor on staff. We know, building principals and superintendents, that we're getting creative. Yes, we all have school social workers and/or certified school psychologists, but that's different. So the regulations state that one certification cannot be substituted for another due to each one having a specialized training. Remember, your school counselor has a caseload, and the work of the school counselor impacts all students. The work of our social workers in some of our buildings may target specific students, as does the work of the licensed or certified school psychologist. Again, we each have our roles. There is crossover in the word counseling. All 3 professions do counseling, but it's important that our students have access to a certified school counselor. The district needs to define how that will happen, but I'm going to be honest with you. We know that we do not have NYSED coming down and visiting our schools, but they are looking at our websites. I won't reveal the couple of districts that have had NYSED check on their building websites and their district websites to take a look at their comprehensive school counseling programs. So New York State cannot mandate that you have to hire another counselor, but we know down the road, many of our districts are adding that one new position each year. And also to make the numbers manageable, especially with the requirements of a comprehensive school counseling program, a school counseling curriculum, and the individual progress review in our middle and high schools. Let's talk for a minute about the IPR. So the individual progress review used to be a grade 7 through 12 back in the dinosaur days when I was a school counselor. And Dr. Rotunda, you too, you and I both worked together in the dinosaur days before we went over to the far side of higher ed. The progress review must be provided individually. So it's a one-on-one, approximately 15 minutes. It's not a counseling session. It's meant to be a check-in around academics, SEL, and college and career readiness. And again, the state says only a certified school counselor provides the IPR. I'm going to be honest with you folks, this forces us as school counselors to have that one-on-one face-to-face with each one of our middle and high school students. But the things that we can learn, especially from the kids that don't fly in our faces all the time, but the things we can learn help us set up whether or not they need additional support and services. The IPR is not the IEP. If we're in an IEP meeting, that would include a lot more professionals than the IPR. The IPR is the counselor and the student. Let's talk a little bit about curriculum. And I know I'm trying to get through so much of this as quickly as possible because we have our guest speaker, who I want to introduce to you in a few minutes. And I tend to talk too much. So the curriculum is a structure. It's not going to be as highly developed, and I don't mean not to give our school counselors credit for doing a good job, but this is a new requirement. And the curriculum are lessons in a framework, lessons for each grade level, and lessons around academic, college, and career, and SEL. Now, the state does not specify how many lessons for each grade level. I would expect or guess from my experiences as a supervisor that in the elementary school, my K-5 schools, I'm going to emphasize a lot of SEL and a lot of academic getting ready for middle school. In the middle school, I'm going to emphasize SEL because social media makes school counselors and their building administrators nuts with a number of issues that come up because of social media and cell phone usage and internet safety. But we're also going to start some college and career work with our middle school kids. Even though that's a K through 12, we may have less of it at the elementary, a little more of it high school. I'm sorry, a little more of it during the middle. When we shift to the high school, folks, we are really looking at that academic component, but we know our high school kids need SEL just as much as everybody else. And then, of course, our college and career planning. The reality is there are other professionals in our schools. We have elementary teachers teaching programs such as Second Step or Student Success Skills or Harmony. Those are part of the school counseling curriculum. At the middle school, we might be using Overcoming Obstacles. We might use the middle school component of Naviance. And again, at the high school, many of our schools are using Naviance to organize our college and career planning, and some of the academic motivation. Our health teachers have lessons that specifically support social emotional development. Our PE teachers, our technology teachers in the middle school are doing internet safety and how to address social media issues and digital safety. So all of these can become part of the school counseling curriculum. And then there are specific lessons based on data that the school counselor will deliver. Most importantly, let's remember that the school counselor, with the help of the building administrators and the academic teachers should identify which other lessons are all part of the curriculum so we know the knowledge and skills that our kids are receiving. And then last but not least, direct services are so important, that direct contact. And again, that's one of the reasons why the IPR is individual, because honestly, back in 2014 and 15, we had people tell the Board of Regents, and NICE said that their child was not seeing their counselor every year. So this requires it. So I did it. Sean Davenport, I'm happy to introduce you, our colleague, Superintendent of District 5 in Harlem in New York City. Sean's here to join us today because New York City came to the table a year later. New York City was given a 1-year extra delay for implementation because of the sheer numbers. Training 3,300 school counselors and the building administrators in this new model. Sean is now the superintendent because there was a reorganization. And Sean's going to talk to us a little bit, Sean, if you can, about the rollout in your district, about getting people on board. And also, what do you see are the key things around collaboration? So Sean, welcome, and please jump in.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Carol, for having me come on today. It's one of the challenges of juggling different things as a superintendent. So I'm doing a district leadership event at the same time. So I'm in between two spaces, but it's okay. I'm happy to get away from that because they were trying to get too touchy-feely.
But you're with counselors and administrators.
Right, and that's my lead-in, right? I'm with counselors. And so for us, let me just give you a little context. If you're a guidance counselor and you're on the call, first of all, thank you, because that's a different commitment that people don't recognize. And I'm speaking from experience. I was a principal for 13 years, elementary and a middle high school. So as a student, though, I did not value a guidance counselor because I had a terrible guidance counselor. And that experience led me to disavow the importance of a guidance counselor when I opened my own school. So when I founded a school, I didn't hire one first because I said, no one needs to inform me that guidance counselor is, I can read your notes. No one needs to inform me. I'm talking about my experience. I'm coming to you from a point where the guidance counselor at that time was a person who was supposed to support the student in decision making, and the one I had was very negative. He wasn't encouraging. He basically did not allow me to go to or live up to my expectations because I wasn't a great student, not because I couldn't do the work. I was in an environment that wasn't supportive. So therefore, my experience led me to not take that role as serious when I opened up my own school. Biggest mistake I ever made. And one of the things in New York City is it's not a necessity to hire one right away. You hire what your budget allows you to hire, and you have to make decisions. I made a wrong decision. So I opened a school without, quote unquote, because I see all these terms coming in, the guidance counselor. And what happened was my culture was off because I had no one paying attention to the students in a way in which that role allows itself to take form. And what do I mean by that? When you have situations where students need someone to talk to, someone who they can go to with their problems, things are going on at home or in class, I didn't have that person. And so as the the years went on and the school grew, I realized I was in trouble. That you just couldn't put someone, a teacher, in the role without the training. You just couldn't make somebody your counselor without the training. And that was my thought, that anyone could do that job. However, understanding my missteps, I had to then go out and get support. And along this time, I met Carol, and we started to have these conversations about the role of the school counselor, and how they are crucial and integral part to the success of the school. So when I then transitioned to a middle high school, the middle school that I transitioned to did not have a school counselor either. And I was like, well, how can we function without a counselor in middle school? These are the most challenging times of the student's life, and they have nobody to go talk to. The person who was living and fulfilling that role was a teacher who had no training and had no knowledge. And I think that's one of the things that we don't, as principals, oftentimes, I'm speaking from personal experience, I can't speak for every principal, but from my experience and some of my colleagues' experience, we don't bring into play that this person is the integral part of the team. If you don't have them at the table, if you all aren't there with decision makings happening, then we have missed the boat in supplying a need that all of our kids have, right? And one of the most significant and important roles on any principal staff, in my opinion, is the counselor. The problem we have in New York City is that the numbers of counselors to student ratio is astronomical. It's like 250 to 1. And can you imagine if you're that student number 248 and you haven't had an opportunity to get in the office, or you have a problem, you got to wait your turn because we're not giving enough support for the students in the schools, how does that student feel? And that was some of the trials and tribulations I had to deal with. And I had to figure out ways, like I had to go to get internships and bring in people we could train and support that were in school to be counselors. So I recognized that faux pas. So when I got into that middle school, the first hire I made, my very first hire, was a counselor, at the expense of some other positions, because I knew when I opened the school without one, I had a hard time. I'm not going to go into a new school environment without one again. And so I, looked at the budget, made choices. I saw we had too many secretaries. I accessed the secretary or whatever, just to free up space so I could bring in that counselor to service the middle school students. And one of the things I needed to do with that counselor was to help me set the culture of what I thought the tone should be. And part of that was we wanted to eliminate suspensions. And the reason why the suspensions were higher than what they should have been was because there was no intermediary. Some kids didn't need to be suspended. They needed to see their guidance counselor. They needed someone that could say, well, this was my problem, and this was the support I needed. And then this guidance counselor could help support what decisions we made. So it was almost like we left that middle person out. So that person was never at the table. And sometimes the dean's job in our school system, they're the heavy. And so if you send someone to the dean, with us, they weren't going to get the touchy-feely, tell me what's going on. Whereas the counselor could at least come back and say, look, there's some situations, I think we can mediate this before you have to do any drastic decisions. So let's try that first. Let's have these conversations, and then we'll do next steps after that. And that was a shift for us in the school. And that shift actually got us more involved with getting all of our students trained to be mediators, about a good number, not all of them, but a good significant number, where we were able to then come to the table and our counselor led that work. And it helped us cut suspensions down drastically, because like I said, it wasn't that the kids were doing things out of the ordinary. Middle school kids are tough. And then I had a middle high school at the same time, but we were always missing the step of sending our kids to the most drastic discipline measures as opposed to having them come in and finding out what was the root cause. And, you know, so I think having counselors involved in your cabinet, on your school leadership team as possible, if possible, is detrimental, well, is very supportive, and it helps not only set the school tone and culture, but it also gives students an outlet. And we developed a culture where if you wanted to find a student later on, you know, we would go to the counselor's office because they would be there and they were there to support. And then the other part I want to make is that the role of the counselor is so expansive that oftentimes schools begin to make them the college person. And that's something that we can't do either. You know, we need them support, but then they can't have those extra roles because there's just so many kids that they're working with. And so we also had to try to find ways to supplement and support. And but for the most part, I don't think my 13 years as a principal would have been as successful as they were without the support of my counselor being on the team, helping and supporting us with not just where students should be in classes, what classes they should be taking, but most importantly, just how I need to be able to interact with our students at times where I may have just missed the boat on why they were acting a certain way. And then the other thing about counselors that I think is important is that they are, or you all are, change agents. And you are at times equity warriors in the sense that you're providing students with entry points and access to opportunities that a principal knows nothing about. And so we kind of need that support. And that's why I think it's important for counselors to be at the table, especially at the beginning of the year we're planning. But most importantly, I think with New York City, we are, some areas we're ahead of the game or catching up, I should say, but in most areas we're still far behind because we have so many students and so few counselors. And one of the things I'm meeting about now and trying to change is making sure that we can at least hire extra counselors to support our students in certain roles, as opposed to other areas and using those funding dollars. So if I get extra funding, I would try to really make sure that a school has enough counselors to support their students based on the school's needs more so than anything else.
Dr. Davenport, we can't thank you enough. You're our hero today. Thank you so much for sharing your message and for your advocacy, which you have. It was a conversion process.
It was.
But thank you. And the group got so excited when you stopped using guidance counselor and switched to school counselor. They were holding their breath because that, you know, change takes a long time. But for as long as I've known you, you've been an active advocate of adding counselors to the buildings you've worked in. I've met some of your counselors, and we really appreciate you being here today. And I know you've got to get back to your leadership team meeting, but you're welcome to stay because I'm just going to take the next 5 minutes to wrap up before Q&A. So Dr. Davenport, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope to see you soon in person back in New York City.
Yes.
And
let me just say this before I go. I know everyone was
Please.
having a tidbit about the counselor guidance counselor. New York City's still behind. So the word counselor is interchangeable, not as but what I mean is that we're behind in terminology as well, and we're behind a lot of things. And one of those most important things I tell you that we're really behind in is appreciating the work that you all have to do with so little support and resources, and I want to acknowledge that. And you know, and my counselor did not recognize the lack of support until she left and realized, you know, she moved to Florida and was doing counseling work. And then she actually began to appreciate her being because sometimes she didn't want to be at the table. I got this to do, I have that to do. Is this so much? Do I have to be at this meeting? And it was like, yes, I need you there because you keep me on task with certain things that I need to know. And so I just want to make that point that we're still behind, but we're trying to catch up. And I will then definitely relay a lot of this stuff to our chancellor about how we can continue to improve our work with you all and making sure that it's not only valued, but revered, because you guys really help us with our academic success.
Thank you again, Dr. Davenport. And I also want to do a quick shout out. We do have a lot of New York City school counselors in the room. And as you know, we have been doing a lot of training over the last 3 years, but training is not the same. Training is knowledge, but it's going back to your buildings, collaborating with your principals, and putting that training into action. So thank you again. I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
And have a good leadership meeting.
Appreciate it. I'm putting my email in the chat, so if all wants to
Okay,
reach out
thank
to me.
you.
Okay.
And I will.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And I'm just going to wrap up with just a couple of slides, and then we will go into Q&A for those of you that can stay. So that's Dr. Davenport's name, and he put the information in chat for you. I also, folks, let me just go back to slideshow here. I also dropped in an exit survey. So if you get 3 minutes to give us feedback, because we'll continue to do as many excuse me, school counselor principal workshops as possible going forward to next year. So the implications is that those of you in the suburbs, the issue of defining access, New York City is still struggling with defining access. What does it mean? We have 100 buildings that do not have a certified school counselor. Some of your districts are struggling with the same, but listen, it's a statewide effort. Even though it's been from 2019, 2020, we all need to recognize we lost 2 years. We need our district plan, which we have in New York City, and building level plans. You actually can look on the website of any New York City school, and there will be a comprehensive school counseling program plan. Some are much more better developed than others, but certainly when I go to the suburbs, I usually see a district plan. And then an advisory council. That's a district thing, not a building thing. We can't add any more burden to our work. Again, just getting started, connecting to your vision and mission. Each building should have their own school counseling vision and mission, which then flows with the program mapping. In other words, writing down what you're doing, aligning it with standards. That's a whole different workshop. Many counselors have participated in that. And then, of course, your plan is that your district and your building plan should be led by the school counselor, folks. Updated. This is the time of the year to do your update for next year. And then have it on your website. Let your families and communities know what a great job you're doing. And then, of course, some of our building plans are on the district website. Some of our building plans are on the building website. What do the plans include? And again, this is right out of the regs: objectives and goals, the standards, a description of the lessons you deliver, your outcomes. You know, what is our goal? Our goal is to improve attendance, reduce behavioral incidents, make sure we have 90% of our kids graduating on time. So we want to establish goals and focus our efforts in that direction. And then just, you know what, Bob, let's just skip the poll, and I apologize, but just a reminder, school counseling programs are collaborative. Let's just look at number 2 for a second. All teachers and staff can assist with the IPR. You know that is, everybody want to do a shout out? False. Only the school counselor can do the IPR. And then last but not least, counselors, psychologists, and social workers all have unique skills that complement each other and provide additional services. So we were going to do a poll, but I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. Okay, and then remembering that the pandemic has created mental health challenges, and every student, and I think every adult, has suffered from an adverse childhood or an adult experience. Our counseling plans provide tier 1 universal interventions. Don't forget that, folks, especially when you administrators, when you know your counselors need to access classrooms and teachers, it's so very important. And then comprehensive counseling plans do help, and the research supports that. So I'm going to now just jump into Q&A, Bob. Let's see what we've got here. And I'm going to stop the share because we're going to send everybody the PowerPoint. And I'm also going to drop in the exit survey. We still have 160 people with us. So folks, let's see if we have any questions.
We had two related questions. One was, can school counselors see mandated counseling kids? And the follow-on question was, how many mandated counseling kids can a school counselor see? What's the number that's allowed in a caseload of mandated kids?
You know, Dr. Rotunda, I'm not 100% sure, but yes, school counselors can do mandated counseling. Many districts have counselors, psychologists, and social workers all support kids with mandated counseling. I sort of remember, yikes, and please don't quote me on this.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 65 or 70. Bob, do you know? Maybe we can find out and double check with state ed.
Yeah, I've actually never heard a number of. It's always been how many occasions and how many meetings does someone have to have in a week? For example,
Melissa, yeah, sorry, Melissa just put it in there. I believe it's
Okay.
75. It
All right.
was lower, and that's a combination of individual and group.
okay,
But we'll try and double check that also. Average expected caseload. I'm going to be honest with you. ASCA suggests 250 to 1. We know that we have schools that have less than 250, and we have schools that have a heck of a lot more than 250. New York State has not mandated a number. I'm just going to provide an opinion, which may not be popular. I believe that your caseload is based on the program you deliver, and your principal should be aware of the program you deliver. So if you have 400 kids and you cannot get to everything that is now required, you've got to advocate for your kids and for you to get additional help. So please, folks, I don't see that anyone in particular, anyone in New York in particular is going to mandate a number. Bob, the charter schools?
yeah, that's been a couple of questions. Do charter schools need to follow the school counseling regs?
My understanding, and I'm giving you an opinion from reading the regs, is that the regs hold for public and private, and it depends on the charter of your school. Some of our charter schools, for example, in New York City, are public charters. I apologize to Catherine, I'm not sure about that, but that's a question that we can send to NYSEG, or that you could send to NYSEG just to clarify that. But I do know it applies to all public and private, and I think it depends on the charter. I know that's kind of a wiggly answer, but we know that sometimes regulations are written in ways that make it a little difficult to figure out.
Who should be involved in the planning of a comprehensive school plan? Our whole MTSS team is involved, and it seems like too large of a team.
Good point. I would expect or hope that if it is your MTSS team, that it includes your school counselors. That is critical, that the plan, the program, the plan should come from the school counselors and then maybe go to the MTSS team for some input and feedback. Dr. Rotunda, do you have an opinion on that one?
I don't like to say the more the merrier. It needs to be a comprehensive team, but it needs to be school counselors to start with the support staff around them that are going to actually have to deliver the program. But it seems like it could get too big if it was the entire MTSS team.
So that is difficult, but I would urge you, you'll see on one of the slides, we made some suggestions as to who should be involved, but certainly counselors, psychologists, social workers, administrators, key teachers. If you're not using your whole MTSS team, which does seem like huge. MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. And I will put that up there.
The other thing that happens, we had a large team to develop a program at our school, and we broke down into subcommittees for certain parts of it, which kind of made it more efficient. So that's another way to do it.
I see Janet has a question about counseling managers. That's in New York City. By coming to the schools. Janet, I know there's a reorg this year. I have not met all the new counseling managers. Last year there was student service managers. So I would reach out to your counseling manager and maybe invite your counseling manager to your building. I know the counseling managers have been doing PD. We did one yesterday on the IPR for District 28, but that was with Suhani Perez-Sadler and myself. So certainly reach out to your counseling manager. And I apologize, folks. It's multi, not muddy.
Muddy.
Systems of
Noah
support.
has his hand up.
Okay, and I'm throwing the exit survey in again. Please, guys, give us feedback. Okay, Noah?
All right, thank you.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you? So I'm a principal in New York City. The MTSS slide that you showed for school counselors and supportive services, where can I access that, or are you going to email the
Noah,
PowerPoint?
we're sending you everything.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes,
And then
so you'll have that. Oh my goodness, you can't open the survey. It's a Google Doc. Yikes.
It's also going to be in the email.
Okay, Bob, thank you so much. So I
Fantastic.
hate that when that happens.
and then I have just one more
Sure,
question.
Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing is in terms of like a curriculum for school counselors as it relates to bullying or the
Oh my goodness.
Is there any curriculums out there that people here feel are successful or they recommend? I'm just curious.
So let's see, Noah, what people have to say. But Bob, a faux pas, because I skipped over that slide. The New York State School Counselor Association has a repository of 212 lessons.
Got it.
I think it's
I'm sorry,
312.
312. I haven't had enough coffee
312.
this morning.
The
312
discount.
lessons from kindergarten through grade 12, 8 lessons for each grade level in academic SEL and college and career readiness. Now, second step is one program, overcoming obstacles. And again, the transcript, Noah, will come to you. I also like Sanford Harmony, which is now free, has a ton of lessons. CASEL, C-A-S-E-L, has some really challenging lessons, especially around topics that address bullying and bystanders. So certainly Circle Forward. Thank you, Melissa. I didn't know that one. So we've been collecting resources. There are some resources on the PowerPoint that I didn't share with you. A lot of them have to do with counselors and principals collaborating and teaming. So there's more out there. Your counselor does not have to write one lesson, and some of these are free. Second step is expensive, and it really is a whole school effort. You really need to get all of your teachers involved, not just your counselor. Student success skills, let me drop another one in there, also has a lot of information. Bob, can you think of any more?
No, you hit the ones that I was thinking of.
And with some of these, we're looking at what we refer to as evidence-based. So if you do have grant money or public funds, you can use it to buy. But again, remember, that was student success skills. PBIS rewards website. Thank you again, Melissa. So again, think in terms of Harmony, free, overcoming obstacles, free. By free, I mean no cost, but their quality. And NISCA, folks, look at all those lessons that are available to you. I saw Sharon Usher on here today. She was one of the counselors that helped us develop. But I lost track because there were so many of you, but helped
here.
us. I know you are. She helped us
Uh-huh.
develop. She helped us develop the lessons. And I didn't see if anybody else was here who was on the writing team, but we had statewide counselors and New York City counselors. Stopbullying.gov. Thank you, Joseph. Anything else you can think of, Bob?
No.
Okay. Oh, there we go. And so just as an announcement, there are 2 more upcoming workshops. The next one is called Mandates Matter. I hate mandates. I hate people telling me what I have to do, not what I want to do. So we will do a session on Mandates Matter and how it's working. And then the last one will be on revising your plan for next year. So please, folks, counselors, bring your principals, bring your counselors. And if we have no more questions, there we go. Bob, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank
Um,
you.
And
And Bob and I will work on putting a packet together.
Yep.
I always have to go back and make sure that everything we covered is in the PowerPoint, and see if I need to add a last page of some of those resources. So
And,
thank you, everybody.
thank you, Carol, and thanks everybody for attending. We had close to 200 people this morning.
I know,
Stay
it's
tuned.
great.
Stay tuned to your emails for upcoming professional development opportunities. And we will be sharing this presentation as well as the PowerPoint and the chats as soon as we get it all together in the next day or two. Thank you.
Yeah, and Bob, you also put in the Instagram.
Yeah, I did.
I know a few people said they would like to keep in touch and share. So there's also a NISCA scene. So why don't we make
NISCA community, yeah. The NISCA
why don't we
community.
make, somebody's having a happy hour on Friday. Are we invited?
Yeah.
I love it. And it's only